Story Chat with John Fornoff, the art and passion of storytelling. Here's your host, Brian Bullabush.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Story Chat, our little corner of the internet where we hope to inspire and encourage you guys in the art and passion of storytelling. I've done this like 4 times today, John. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm rooting for you, Brian.
Thank you. I need that. It's been a rough
I admire
Thursday.
the fact that you do things like that to humble yourself so that the listener feels more powerful.
Well put. That's well put.
Thank you. But yeah, how you guys doing today?
We're doing great. And
Mr. Steve, we got you back on this week.
Yeah, it's an honor to be back. Thanks a lot.
Last time we had Steve on, and we just ran out of time. It's such rich stuff. So we're going to jump in and do a quick one with you all because
you got somewhere to be, right? So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter one today.
Yeah, a little
right?
bit shorter one, right? And you got to hear about Steve's book. It's wow. And we have a question from a listener. So we've got we introduced Steve in our last show, but if you haven't heard of Steve McCurdy is a writer, a producer, a podcaster. Okay?
Yep.
He's got his own podcast called The Crossroad Diner. The Crossroad Diner. He has written and directed for theater, for motion pictures. He was an Air Force officer. Thank you for your service.
My joy.
Thank you for your service. Thank you.
And also he acted in the Buick Special, the short film I wrote. Did a great job as Mr. Gugliani. A lot of fun. It's just great working with him. And also we taught together. Steve was in charge of the writing portion of the Film Academy we did last year, and I got to help with that. It was just a lot of fun. So we're here at South Georgia Studios, as you can see behind us here for our radio audience, audio audience. We have a backdrop here with South Georgia Studios and a nice camera up here. So just nice.
Yeah, it looks like a Sony you got back there. Nice looking.
You are very, very right. It is.
It's just shaped like a Sony.
As opposed to being partially right. You are so right.
Yeah, well, it was an educated guess. So it looks like the brain looks like a Canon or a Sony. So anyway, but before we talk about the stuff that may or may not cause us to disappear, we did have a question from Miss Ruth Patty, and she sent that.
Real quick, Brian, I want to tell you, sorry to interrupt. We love questions, so feel free to jump in. We had some great questions from Austin last time, so feel free to send us. We love questions, so feel free. And we got one.
And I'm sorry, Miss Ruth, you sent this back mid-February, and I didn't see it, so that's on me. So I apologize. She's very complimentary. John and Bryan, I hope you're doing well. I'm an aspiring writer, and your podcast has been a tremendous encouragement to me. I also attended both Sonicons at Liberty University, and I think it's safe to say Mr. Fornoff has had the greatest impact on my writing. I am attempting to write a novel, and I realized I have several antagonistic forces in my story. Is this a problem? Is it necessary or important to have one main antagonist? Also, would something be intangible like fear be considered an antagonist or a flaw in the protagonist? Thank you so much. Keep up the great work. God bless, Ruth. Whoops, I'm smacking my mic. So, and then she also attached a Bible verse, John 10:10, to that. So,
you know what? I love that verse. I've never been asked this question, so I like questions I haven't been asked before. Now, jump in here too, Steve. What if you have a lot of antagonists? It's something important. Just if you have just a lot of stuff happening to your hero, just left and right, with no sense of, now, if you've got one antagonistic force that is sending out it's connecting all these antagonists coming after you, now you've got a sense of true story. If it's just as random antagonistic forces attack, it doesn't hold together. Something's got to hold them together to make an overall antagonistic force. A good example with Star Wars. You've got some antagonistic forces out there. And then you've got your villain. You think it's Darth Vader. Then you have your uber villain, which is the Emperor. So there's the big force behind all these antagonistic forces. So, and Steve is going to jump in here in just a moment, but
you know me so well.
Yes, he'll jump in. That's right. So I say it's important. You can have a variety of them, but make sure they're connected in some logical way. And also, it's really important when your story is advancing forward that your antagonism increases. The obstacles increase. You don't have a big thing and big thing, and then a little thing. Your story, the pacing goes, you lose interest and all that. Make sure you have something awful happen, then something awfuler. Yes, I did say that. And then something awfuler than that. Keep making.
John does grammar good.
I do grammar good. You're exactly right. That's a great quote.
He's a writer, and he makes up words, and they make sense.
I write out Shakespeare over here. Yes, excellent.
So make sure they're connected some way. Make sure you're increasing your obstacles, and yeah, that's what I would say as far as the antagonistic force.
I like the fact that you got a whole bunch of different, because what this is, I said this before. There's two forces in the universe: love and fear. A protagonist is a protagonist because 100% of stress comes from not getting your way. The protagonist wants something, something's in his way, and it manifests a lot of different ways. And with the rule of rising action, at some point in time, he's going to recognize, oh, this is my thing. This is the thing I have to overcome. It's wearing a lot of different costumes, but this is the thing. And that either calls him forth, if it's a comedy, meaning a positive thing, or it defeats him if it's a tragedy. And the best thing is if you think he's defeated and then he rises. So I don't think a lot of them, but I think to John's point, they have to have a common force so that when he manifests the solution, it solves a lot of the problems. It may, if it's a series and you need it to postpone a couple of them, do that. But it's got to be something about the protagonist's core wound, in my mind.
That's another way to tie it together too. I was just thinking, if you had very well put, thank you. If you have your protagonist, let's say, his house burns down, so that's one obstacle. He runs an antagonistic force. Then he is going down out, he gets stabbed. All right, okay, and then let's say he faces cancer. Okay, pretty soon it's sounding like a country song or a very bad week. So if there are all these, it's like, yeah, we have days like that, but if there's something connecting them all, if there's someone behind all those forces, or if each one of those antagonistic forces, this is what inspired me, what you said, if each one of those antagonistic forces is pushing against the hero in it's like he has a problem with courage. He wrestles with fear. So if all those things are attacking fear, that's another way to unite it. So might not be united as far as your antagonistic force, but it could be united as far as what it's calling forth in your hero, or what it's coming against. It's coming against his courage. It's coming against his sense of hope, or it's coming, whatever, that kind of thing. So that's another way to unite the antagonistic force.
And so if you I'm stuttering here because there's so much that we could talk about.
Yeah.
This is really
a great question.
This is thick. This is a great question.
Yeah.
My belief, and we are, all three of us are men of faith. My belief is that when you ask for a change in your character, that the answer is always yes. And what happens is you're equipped. And part of that equipping is to throw things at you that you got to be able to handle the next 43. So if each one of those things that he is facing is, oh my God, why is this happening to me? But you learn as it goes, it was essential to his development that he had to go through that. It's like wax on, wax off. It's, you have to go through this. And it was part of the plan. It was not arbitrary. It was, Lord, I want to be this. And okay, if you want to be that, here's training day one.
It's so true of life, right?
Yeah.
That's what I love about the story is I learn so much when I write. I learn about life, learn about God, learn about faith, all kinds of stuff. There's a second question she had before we.
Okay, so we'll come back to the first one. I realize I have several antagonistic forces in my story. Is that a problem?
Oh, we just said it's not, as long as they're united, as long as there's something uniting them all and increasing action.
Okay, yeah. Good summation is what I was looking for. Is it necessary or important to have one main antagonist?
We kind of answered. I think
Yep.
we did answer that one. Yeah,
Mhm.
it does help, but if she's got a compelling reason to make several antagonists, if there's something uniting them against him, or something united in their something that's coming against in him or whatever, that's a cool thought.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was going for. Repetition.
Yeah.
So
Okay, got it.
yeah,
And there's
yeah,
a second.
that's
She had
amazing.
another question.
Yes. Also, would something intangible like fear be considered an antagonist or a flaw in your protagonist?
Oh yeah, yeah, I like that. It can be. I would think, and I'd like to hear Steve on this. I don't have to prompt you. I'm just like, it's like, it's coming back to you, man. Okay, so if I mess
your show,
I
man.
know, but if I mess up, then you make me look good. So it's like
That's my job.
Okay.
That is my job.
Oh, you got a full-time job there for now. But anyway, as far as fear is a great antagonist, and actually, and that could be that's a great flaw in your character. And what I like to do with characters is, and actors love this too, is you've got opposing forces within that character. For instance, outwardly, your protagonist might be putting on a brave face. They look like they've got it all together, but inwardly they struggle with fear. Do I really have what it takes? Or is this, that kind of thing. So it's nice to have an outward appearance, and inwardly they're fighting something.
And that makes him very relatable.
Oh yes, because we all have those little conflicts that, like, we like to be this way, but inwardly we're struggling with this kind of thing, and so that makes him very, very relatable. Good point. So yes, fear can be a great antagonist. I would think you would need some kind of personification of that fear, unless you're doing a horror or a horror film like that or something like that. I would think it needs to be some kind of a force of nature. That could be that's a legitimate man versus nature kind of thing. Or it could be, if it's personified in some way, I think you would need to have that, rather than this nebulous fear over there. But it can be manifest through people or through situations. And that's how he deals with the fear. But what's cool about your question is, it's really personifying. It's making that antagonistic force, is getting down to what's the root. The root of it is, he's not just fighting against somebody that's against his goal. He's really wrestling fear. There's an outer story. That's the one where you can, this guy, he wants to be an Air Force pilot. Okay. But that's what the story's about. But inwardly, he's got to wrestle with fear. Okay. So there's the inner story. That's what makes your story rich. All right. So Steve.
We could go on and on. Why is your protagonist afraid of this? And if you say, well, it's logical. I mean, nobody wants to have a hurricane come down on their house. Well, there's some people that go, okay, well, we got to prepare for this. There's things that you do. Why has this triggered fear in them? What lack of control, and what does lack of control mean to the character? I think if you tie all of the fears, whatever the things are, if they're circumstantial or if they're emotional, if you tie them to that, what the character wants or what they're afraid of, it'll make sense.
I'll make sure we don't run out of time, because I've got something. I think that was it.
No, that was it. And
wonderful
so if I could add one more thing, and something that I've learned through Robert McKee, which I do a lot of my study under him and his book Story, which is fantastic. Something that he stresses about is, whenever somebody asks him a question, whether if a question like this, he'll just look at them and go, sure. And kind of shrug his shoulders.
That's what we should have done. We should have done like, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Get the editor, cut that.
And that's basically what he says. It's sure, but does it work? Because if it doesn't work, then maybe you need to rethink it. But if it works, sure, there's no hard and fast rule to that. So
what will work, what won't. Well, something that
you guys got a lot more in depth than my sure. So that's not even my sure. That's Robert McKee's sure.
Somebody asked you what time it was. You told them what time it was. We told you how to find the oar to make the watch.
There you go. There you go.
Wow.
So.
Well, something we hinted at the last show, and we could all disappear if we have this. We don't know.
I'm not gonna say that.
We could be He disappeared as a verb there. In fact, everybody listening could be disappeared by the knowledge we're about to. Well, we won't get into. Well, tell you what we're going to do. We're just going to jump into the story. Okay, this is Steve McCurdy, my friend here, has written an amazing book and screenplay, and it's based on some real events that actually happened. He was an Air Force officer, and he worked. He was in charge of the Minuteman
missiles.
I mean, were you the guy that would push the button?
Yeah,
the guy that would push the button to make the Minuteman like that. Like this is So there's something. I'll let you tell the story.
Sure.
It's just pretty fascinating. So he's got this novel and you got the screenplay. Tell us.
Well, and also on YouTube, if you go to Chapter 1 TWS, you can watch Chapter 1 of the book. We shot it at a launch control center at Whitman Air Force Base.
Yes, it looks fantastic. It's very well done. It'll grab you. It's like, oh wow. So what is it again? How do you get to it?
Chapter 1 TWS, the Whitman scenario.
The Whitman scenario. Chapter 1 TWS.
It'll be the first or second thing that comes up.
Is that short for something? TWS?
The Whitman scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Just okay.
It's the initials of the title of the book.
Okay.
Because I didn't want anybody to have to remember all of it. So the night before Nixon resigned,
Richard Nixon, president.
Strategic Air Command, who was in charge of all nuclear weapons other than the Navy's submarines, was driven to a very high alert status, and Nixon was not available. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff had to pull off an enormous bluff. And nobody who was on duty at the time knew what was happening or that it was a bluff. To the minds of everybody who was on duty in charge of a nuclear weapon, we were 12 seconds away from launch. When you launch a nuclear weapon, any of the nuclear weapons, bombs or missiles, there is no recall, there is no self-destruct. That can be hacked. So we had spent our careers learning how to do this and knowing that it was insane that half of the world would be destroyed and the other half would be unlivable. So there was a lot of stress that night. And the next day, in the middle of the night, things were backed down. But we were told the next day, you are never to discuss this among yourselves or with your crew members. And 35 years later, I went, this has got to be, surely this is releasable now. I went to the Air Force with my outline, told them what I wanted to talk about, was told that did not happen. And I thought,
even though you were there,
even though I was there. And so the colonel that you talk to in LA who coordinates these things, I called him every 3rd of July. I figured around maybe the Patriot, it would help. No, every time. So one year I called him and he said, McCurdy, hang on. And I heard him close his door. He said, I'm retiring this weekend. I'm putting a little Post-it note here on my phone. Do not take this guy's calls. What you're talking about never happened, and you cannot get us to sanction you writing something that never happened. Now, I can't stop you from writing fiction. I said, but Colonel, I really want about it. And he went, McCurdy, I can't stop you from writing fiction. I said, but you don't understand. I think it's really, he said, McCurdy, I'm hanging up. And so when he hung up, I went, oh, I think he was sending me a message. And so I took it out of a kind of a docudrama kind of thing and turned it into one guy going through this, his wife, his crew members, the people that he worked with, their perspective, and everything in it. When I took that copy and ran it through OSI, that's the Air Force's CIA. They said that I had to change the color of the checklists from what they actually were to another color. So we're going to get a bunch of money from the Sonic people.
Yeah.
What color would you call that?
From my perspective, that is a red.
Okay. I can't use that. So the checklist became crimson -5. So that's the things that are not true in there. The rest of it is composites and whatnot. But because we did not know. And then when I published the book, I got emails from all over the country, 200 of them, people saying, I never thought this story would see the light of day. We had a lot of people that we lost 4 people at Whitman that night, and that was never revealed. In the book, I have it done in a much more honorable way than what happened. But I got an order. I got an order for 5 books from a guy. I was signing them and sending them to people. And he said, I want you to send me one here. And the other 4 go to my wife and my 3 children. And I want you to inscribe them with, this was the night your father lost his mind. And he was in an institution. And that was the most profound sale I made of that story.
Wow. And you said lives were lost that night.
Lives were lost. Yeah, and some of them were in the process of doing things in the fog of war, and some of them, if we were armed, and in the chapter 1, there's a thing that happens that is very, very dramatic, and our job was to guard those missiles against unauthorized launch. And so even if our partner started to initiate a launch or stop an authorized launch, our job was to stop them with deadly force if necessary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you're always watching your back. It was a very paranoid time, and the Strategic Air Command was a very paranoid organization because it's nukes. You don't want a crazy person making a decision. The Whitman scenario is the lead up, the emotional development of those people, the circumstances and the situations, and how they can look this way when they're actually this way because of the cloud and the threat and the fog of war.
How close did we come?
12 seconds.
12 seconds.
Wow.
Man. And what was going through your mind through all this?
This is manifested in the characters. Some of us thought that we might as well, we're going to die doing this, and our families are already dead. When you go to that level of alert, you quit communicating with the outside world.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Including your security forces up topside. You're in a secure bunker that it'd have to take a direct hit to knock you out. But once you take a nearby hit, the elevators and things collapse outside your door that opens outward, an 8-ton door that opens into the debris of the elevator shaft. So, you're not going to die in the explosion, but you're never going to get out of there. And we had 21 days of food, 17 days of water, and 3 days of air.
Wow. Oh, that doesn't make sense.
It was not great planning on the part of the airplane.
Whoops. Wow.
So anyway, those pressures manifest over about a 7-hour period. The screenplay is about 120 pages of the total 300 of the book. It's the action part. But I think the thing I love about the book is it develops the relationships between husbands and wives in the military, between brothers on a crew who then have to look at each other and go, "Are you a bad guy?" And anything that you do can be read either way. Yeah. So it's kind of a suspense thriller in that sense.
Yeah. And for those of you who are interested, this is on Amazon. I just looked it up. And I'm reading through the reviews as you're kind of talking through it. And some of them are interesting. There's one guy saying it's not a accurate portrayal of Missileer life.
That's interesting, because that's the award that I got was from the Association of Missileers, that they said they had never seen anything printed, published, or produced that came that close to an accurate representation of what the pressure part.
So you're kind of going a step beyond Tom Clancy here, at least when it comes to Missileers.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote it for Missileers.
Yeah.
I wrote it. My commander, who I went through that process with, was the smartest human being I've ever encountered. He had 2 masters, 2 doctorates, and was just the greatest guy. And he was ill, and I wanted to get the book in his hands before he passed. he had me send a case of them to Afghanistan. His son was a colonel deployed, and his son gave a copy of the book to all of his officers, and I was very honored by that. That was a wonderful thing.
Let me ask you, Steve, on this. So we can pick it up Amazon.com.
Yeah.
The Whitman Scenario by Steve McCurdy, McCurdy. I practiced. Okay.
You did good.
Okay. A quick question before we go is, tell us what it was like. We've got people out there that they have a true story about their grandparents that went through the Holocaust, or whatever, or a story about their mom was the first person to fly,
Sure.
Those kind of stories. But when you're adapting it to it's a quote unquote fiction, but it could be on. What are some things you when you're adapting it to a story, a real life thing, adapting to a story? What are some things you have to give up? What are some things you have to? What's important to you as you're going through?
Most important thing is you make it interesting. People want to read the story.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And your 10 beat process is very critical to figuring out how to do that. I took one very similar to that, and I went to the book after I'd written the book. It said, at the halfway point, this needs to happen. And then this, and before that, this. And I took it, and I just took some sticky notes, and I put them at those page breaks.
Yeah.
And then I went in and I looked, and I had done that.
Wow, just naturally
to the page. And the first ones were off by 3 or 4 pages, but that was the sequence they were happening in. And so that made adapting it to the screenplay very, very easy.
Yeah.
Because the structure was already there. I think you've got to make your own decision about what's important to you. And it's got to be subject to how interesting can you make that and stay both in your story and its truth and in the envelope of entertainment.
That's right. That's good. That's very well put. Well, Steve, want to talk about also just thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
That's right.
I think I just
having me on your show, Steve.
I think I just picked up a podcast.
And next week it's Story Chat with Steve McCurdy.
That's right.
Yeah. So I was on your show and really enjoyed it. So I want to talk very quick as we go. Is the Crossroad?
The Crossroad Diner.
Crossroad Diner is your podcast you do. Right. And then you've got, of course, the Whitman Scenario we talked about. You can pick that on Amazon. And we're looking at, you got the screenplay. We got a producer out there. It's very doable. This is it's from a producing point of view. It's like, oh my goodness, it takes place in a silo with a couple of
that we get outside of it, but from a production standpoint, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Soviet key players, and the people in Washington, D.C., all of those folks could be played by leads because they're 2 and 3 day shoots.
Oh man, this is like doable. We're talking to a producer out there. This is a fascinating book, fascinating story, and thank you for being there for us.
My joy.
My
joy.
All right, thanks for being on the show.
This is a great podcast, guys.
Yeah,
this is a service. I want to read the stories that come out of this.
Oh, me too. I'll go ahead and write them.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Story Chat. If you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions for John or feedback on the show, please email us at storychatwithjohn@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.